Serafina de la Villain slowly opens her eyes, waking up in the dead silence of a cold, pitch-black stone cell. There's only a single tiny ray of sunlight peeking through a small window to light up the room, and you can totally feel her confusion setting in as she tries to figure out where on earth she is. That confusion instantly turns into pure horror when she realizes her hands and feet are shackled in heavy chains, and worst of all, there's a thick iron collar locked tighter on her neck. Serafina just slumps down in defeat. It hits her hard that she's now officially a prisoner of war after suffering a crushing defeat against the barbarians. All this chaos actually started back in the barbarian territory in the year 1342, right in the middle of a massive, brutal battle raging inside a valley. Out there, the silver-armored knights were clearly getting overwhelmed, struggling to hold the line against the relentless, brutal waves of barbarian warriors smashing into their ranks. Seeing things go south so fast, the captain of the rifle brigade desperately ordered his troops to ready up and open fire to push back the enemy's advance. Even when the knight lieutenant reported that their defenses had totally collapsed, Serafina told him to keep his cool to maintain the pride of Eldoran's first eastern expedition. She ordered her troops to slowly fall back, while she bravely stayed right at the front lines, swinging her sword to deflect every single attack coming their way. Looking at all her fallen comrades, Serafina made a hardcore vow to ensure as many of her remaining soldiers as possible made it out of this bloodbath alive. But suddenly, that hope took a massive hit when a giant barbarian named Vior showed up and literally tore through the knight's formation with just one swing of his massive sword. Getting super bored of just swatting away regular soldiers, Vior pointed his blade right at Serafina, singling her out for a one-on-one duel. Knowing she couldn't just let a monster like him keep rampaging through her men, Serafina boldly accepted Vior's deadly challenge. After leaving a final message for her brother, Serafina fearlessly charged forward, putting her life on the line to protect the last of her surviving troops. She leaped high into the air and slammed her sword against Vior's colossal weapon, creating this insanely loud metallic clash that sent sparks flying everywhere. Serafina's sword actually started glowing with a cool blue light as she poured every ounce of her strength into holding back the overwhelming pressure of Vior's brutal strike. The two of them fiercely traded blows back and forth until finally, a blindingly bright flash of light completely covered the whole scene. When the light faded, Serafina was on her knees with her sword shattered to pieces, and she just resigned herself to her fate, telling Vior to finish her off. But in a crazy twist, Vior totally refused. He declared that from now on, Serafina belonged to him, hinting that he had his own special plans for the captive knight. Cut back to the present inside the cell, and Serafina starts crying out of pure fear, terrified that she's going to be turned into a slave laborer or tortured for military intel. Her body trembles even harder when she remembers Vior's words. She is absolutely dreading the thought that she might just end up being used to satisfy his barbaric desires. Tied up and helpless, Serafina screams in total frustration. She feels incredibly humiliated being locked up in this cold, dark cell, treated like nothing more than an animal. Amidst all that humiliation, her mind drifts back to the battlefield. She can't help but think about her squad, which was probably completely wiped out since they didn't have time to pull off an organized retreat. Still mourning their fate, Serafina punches the cell wall with her shackled hands. She's haunted by the thought of her soldiers either dead or left wandering out in the wild because she failed them. The guilt just eats her alive as she imagines the people back in the capital starving to death if they fail to fully conquer the eastern territories from the barbarians. As a result, she just kneels there in the middle of her prison, crying her eyes out because she feels like she totally failed her sacred duty as a noble to protect her people's well-being. Her moment of despair is suddenly interrupted when a girl named Circe walks into the cell carrying a basket. Serafina instantly goes on high alert the moment she spots all the creepy tools hanging from Circe's belt. Serafino is convinced she's about to be tortured for military secrets, but surprisingly, Circe explains that her only job is to prep the prisoner, so she looks exactly the way her master wants. To kick off the prep work, Circe tightens Serafina's chains to the wall. It's basically to make sure our captive knight can't move around too much or put up a fight during the process. Even though she's chained up super tight now, Serafina silently swears to herself that she will never give up or break, no matter how harsh the torture gets. Meanwhile, right outside the cell, the giant Vior is sporting a massive grin. He is seriously hyped to see his precious treasure that he scored from the raid. Back inside, Serafina is getting super confused because, instead of hurting her, Circe starts wiping her down with a wet cloth to clean off all the leftover blood and dirt. While she works, Circe chats about how she originally expected to be dealing with some rough, tough night lady, but is amazed at how gorgeous and feminine Serafina actually looks. Hearing that compliment actually offends Serafina, she angrily snaps back that a true knight absolutely does not need beauty or femininity in their life. The vibe suddenly gets super tense again when Circe pulls out a small knife and some tweezers. Serafina is dead set on the idea that the real torture session is about to begin. Her fear hits a peak, causing Serafina to squeeze her eyes shut and scream. She braces herself for agonizing pain as Circe's hand reaches toward her face. But boy, was she wrong. Circe actually just styles her hair with a cute blue ribbon and dresses her up in this incredibly elegant, luxurious fur gown. Serafina is completely baffled by this bizarre situation, especially since the dress she's wearing smells absolutely amazing thanks to some expensive aromatic oils. While Circe looks super proud of her handiwork, Serafina is still sitting there wondering what kind of weird barbarian ritual she's being prepped for. Out of nowhere, the cell walls shake violently from an insanely loud roar. Serafina realizes that it wasn't thunder at all, but the grand entrance of the barbarian leader. Moments later, Vior appears in the doorway. The giant literally stops in his tracks, totally mesmerized by how stunning Serafina looks after her makeover. Vior finally steps closer, never taking his intense gaze off his captive, marking their reunion in a completely different, much more intimate vibe. Inside the cell, Vior finally gives Serafina his official introduction. He is the heir to the great one-eyed Olden tribe, holding the badass title of Thundering Voice Vior. Seeing him up this close, Serafina finally realizes just how insanely massive Vior really is, and when she locks eyes with those golden, slit-pupil eyes, she is 100% sure the guy standing in front of her isn't just human. That intimidating aura suddenly triggers a memory of her grandfather's old stories about the Eastern expeditions. Specifically about the terrifying masked ritualist who loved doing human sacrifices on altars. Even though she's sweating cold bullets and her courage is shrinking, Serafina desperately tries to keep her dignity intact, scraping together whatever bravery she has left. She proudly declares her identity as a noble daughter of the Levilant family and the expedition commander, who won't go down without a fight. But instead of dragging her to a sacrificial altar, Vior completely throws her off by calling her by a super casual nickname. The big guy genuinely looks like he has zero clue about the creepy sacrifice rituals she's so terrified of. Skipping the small talk, Vior steps right up and drops the bombshell about why he really brought her here. He wants to make her his bride. Hearing that wild confession makes Serafina's face instantly turn beet red from pure shock. She straight up refuses to believe it, thinking Vior is just tricking her into dropping her guard before the real horror show begins. But Vior quickly explains that his clan actually has this generations-old tradition of taking female knights from the enemy side and making them their lawful wives. Serafina thinks that logic is absolutely insane, but Vior smugly reminds her that she was the one who said she'd accepted whatever fate he had in store for her after she was captured. It turns out, Vior had already fallen head over heels for her the moment their swords clashed on the battlefield. Because he could literally feel the incredible passion and sincerity behind every single one of her strikes. Promising that they'd chat more later, Vio heads out, leaving Serafina frozen in place, blushing like crazy right as the heavy iron cell doors slam shut. The whole story actually kicks off 7 years ago in the kingdom of Eldoran, when Sidious de la Villant appointed Serafina as the captain of the Eastern expedition to bring back the lost glory of their family name. Right in the middle of her military duties, Sidious also handed her a party invitation from Countess Ildel, demanding she attend as a proper noble lady. Even though Serafina clearly looked super stressed about the whole idea, while the commoners around the city were struggling and starving, the Lavillant family's lavish horse-drawn carriage cruised right through to the noble estate, all while being secretly watched by a mysterious figure. When she arrives at the party, Serafina steps out wearing this gorgeous pink gown, but you can totally tell from her body language that she feels incredibly awkward being the center of attention. Despite the grand setting, the vibe at the party is honestly pretty dull because the guests are just busy complaining about how the food quality has dropped due to the never-ending war. Not too far away, Serafina is standing all by herself. She's become the main target of nasty whispers from guests who are totally underestimating her ability to lead nights just because she's a woman. Getting sick and tired of the constant snide remarks, Serafina finally decides to slip away to the balcony, muttering to herself and just wishing she could go home and escape all the noise. But her little moment of peace is ruined when 3 women approach her, and not to say a friendly hello, but to basically interrogate her about her new role in the Eastern expedition. The 3 of them start trying to scare her with rumors about dragons and savage monsters, even mocking her by saying that such a dangerous place is absolutely no place for a woman. Those insults finally push Serafina over the edge. She fiercely slams her hands on the table and makes it crystal clear that conquering the East is a sacred duty for the peace of the kingdom of Eldoran. Even after she stands her ground, they still have the nerve to tell her to just give up and get married, which prompts Serafina to storm out of the gazebo, absolutely fuming with anger. Riding in the carriage on her way home, Serafina deeply reflects on her starving people, a bitter reality that feels so incredibly messed up compared to the lavish party she just left behind. Her deep thoughts are suddenly shattered when she hears a cry for help. Seeing a commoner about to get beaten up, she jumps right out and draws her sword without a second thought. Even knowing they're facing off against a noble, the 3 attackers still foolishly charge at her. But Serafina effortlessly parries their strikes and takes all 3 of them down in the blink of an eye. Once she realizes they were only stealing to survive, Serafina's anger completely melts into pity. She actually hands over her jeweled necklace so they can buy food for their families. Looking up at the quiet night sky, Serafina steels her resolve and promises to conquer the Eastern Territory as soon as possible, so that none of her people have to suffer from starvation ever again. The very next day at the palace, Serafina is all geared up in her armor, kneeling solemnly in front of a painting of Princess Wisteria to pray for protection on her upcoming mission. Sadly, that beautiful moment is ruined by her brother, Sidious, who barges in to throw some harsh insults, calling her super selfish for forcing herself to play knight. Right as her brother is pressuring her to hurry up and get married, the whole room suddenly turns dark and terrifying. Like this massive black shadow just appeared out of nowhere to threaten their lives. Out of the blue, the giant barbarian Vio emerges from the darkness, demanding that Serafina become his bride as he reaches out with his terrifying, clawed hand. Serafina suddenly jolts awake in bed, gasping for air. She frantically tries to convince herself that all those horrifying events were just one massive, crazy nightmare. But the moment she turns her head to the side, her heart practically stops. The real-life Vio is actually fast asleep right there next to her bed. All that commotion finally wakes Vio up. He just casually stretches and wonders out loud why Serafina is throwing such a massive tantrum, especially since they are literally in his own bedroom. Serafina panics even more once she realizes the compromising position she is in. To make matters worse, Vior starts deliberately pushing her buttons, teasing her about what supposedly went down last night. Hearing that, all the color instantly drains from Serafina's face because she has absolutely zero memory of it. She starts freaking out, terrified that something awful happened to her while she was out cold. She immediately accuses Vior of forcing himself on her, but the guy just bursts into a hearty laugh. Naturally, this makes Serafina scream at him in pure rage. Feeling like her pride, as a knight, is being totally mocked, her mind spirals into absolute chaos at the thought of being a captive carrying the enemy's child. It is the ultimate insult to the sacred honor she has protected her whole life. Driven by pure despair, Serafina recklessly grabs a sword off the wall and demands that Vior just kill her right then and there, but without even breaking a sweat. Vior effortlessly smacks the blade right out of her hands. Left completely powerless, Serafina drops to her knees and bursts into tears, agonizing over the humiliation. She genuinely feels like she would rather be dead than live with such a massive disgrace. Watching all this unfold, Vior just finds Serafina's whole mindset super exhausting. He honestly cannot wrap his head around why a little bit of embarrassment would make someone want to end their own life. Suddenly, the heavy tension is totally shattered when a female assistant walks in carrying dry clothes. She casually explains that Serafina had actually thrown up and passed out yesterday from an overdose of sleeping medicine. It turns out, the wild night Vior was teasing her about was literally just Serafina passing out after being given a paralysis poison to help heal her battle wounds. Serafina's face instantly turns beet red from the sheer embarrassment of her huge misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Vior just gets dressed and bluntly states that there is no way he would let his future wife die. Such a ridiculous death. Even though she is still super salty about being teased, all Serafina can do is demand her sword back so she can beat him up. Vior just laughs it off and tells her to chill out so they can go grab some breakfast. Once they leave the room, Serafina takes a deep breath to compose herself, though she is still really struggling to accept the harsh reality that she is now completely dependent on Vior's hospitality. Standing there alone, she remembers her grandfather's old words. He once told her that she probably would have been so much happier if only she had been born a boy. Even her older brother used to beg her to quit being a knight and just get married already, fully convinced that a single sword could never change the course of politics. But then, Serafina recalls Vior praising her sword skills. It feels so incredibly ironic to her that a so-called barbarian like Vior is the only one who actually wants her to stay true to who she really is. Finally, she steps out of the room for breakfast. Even though she is just a prisoner of war now, she knows she has to stay strong, fully expecting to choke down some bland, rock-hard military rations. She marches in, muttering to herself about upholding the proud honor of the Leviland clan, desperately trying to assert her dignity despite her captive status. But all that fierce resolve instantly crumbles the second she sees Vior and Cersei casually roasting an absolutely massive, mouth-watering chunk of meat. Serafina practically starts drooling just looking at the sizzling fat. Back in her barren homeland, a feast this luxurious is something you would literally never see. Noticing her staring, Vior slices off one gigantic portion that he thinks is just right, even though to Serafina, that slab of meat looks way bigger than what her stomach could ever handle. This whole setup actually makes Serafina super suspicious. She figures they are intentionally spoiling her with luxury to break down her knightly principles and tame her. So, she snaps at them, proudly declaring that she would rather starve to death than eat an enemy's hand outright before her stomach lets out the loudest, most embarrassing growl ever. Instead of getting mad, Vior just chuckles and gives her some solid advice. Eating is how you show respect to the lives sacrificed, so that they can survive. While Serafina is still hesitating, Cersei leans in and whispers a little secret that makes Serafina's eyes bulge out in total disbelief. It turns out, Vior actually went out hunting all by himself to score the absolute best meat, purely to welcome Serafina as an honored guest. Cersei even reveals that Vior had to fight a fierce battle against a giant black dragon, just so he could serve a delicious meal to his new captive. Cersei then kindly reminds her that, as a noble, It would be terribly rude for Serafina to reject such genuine, hard-earned hospitality. Serafina finally caves and takes a tentative bite, but she is instantly blown away by how incredibly tender the meat is the second she starts chewing. Once that rich, savory flavor explodes in her mouth, Serafina completely loses all self-control. She just starts devouring the meat, savoring every single drop of those delicious juices. It is so insanely good that Serafina actually tears up a little, realizing that even the royal family back home probably never gets to eat a feast this magnificent. Once she is totally stuffed and satisfied, she openly admits how amazing it tastes and agrees to let go of the whole drugging incident with Vior. Looking super curious, Serafina asks what kind of meat it actually was. Vior just smirks and suggests she take a look out the window to see for herself. Serafina instantly starts trembling in fear when she spots the massive carcass of a black dragon being actively skinned by the locals right in the backyard. It finally hits her that she just ate black dragon meat, a legendary creature from the west, infamous for its fiery breath and supposedly highly poisonous flesh. Even though she is totally shell-shocked by the reveal, her appetite does not drop one bit. She just goes right back to scarfing down the rest of the meat until her bowl is completely spotless. With breakfast out of the way, Vior invites her to head toward the mountains, saying he has something really cool he wants to show her. But Serafina stays on high alert, admitting she still cannot fully trust him yet, especially since she has only been a prisoner of war for 2 days. Vior just brushes it off casually, taking another sip of his drink. He drops a little wisdom, telling her that a person's rules and beliefs can naturally shift depending on where they are. He starts by reminding her that seeing different kinds of creatures and cultures is totally normal around here. With a faint smirk, he starts teasing Serafina, asking if the brave knight is actually feeling scared. Hearing that jab, Serafina just grumbles in annoyance while furiously tying her shoelaces. She acts tough on the outside, but deep down, she admits to herself that she totally got swept up by Vior's smooth talk. Standing up straight, Serafina firmly warns him not to get the wrong idea because she still does not trust him completely. But Vior remains super confident that she is going to love her new environment once she sees it with her own eyes. When Serafina questions why he is so sure about that, Vior just gives a relaxed laugh, says it is just a gut feeling, and casually strolls right out of the room. The second they step out of the hut, Serafina gets her first real shock. Her eyes go wide with absolute wonder at the lush, vibrant landscape that looks nothing like what she expected. As they walk through beautiful meadows bordering the coastline, Serafina has to admit that this place is incredibly fertile and practically overflowing with natural resources. Seeing her so amazed, Vior chimes in to explain that while the battlefields they fought on were barren, this land is actually pulsing with an incredibly strong life energy. Serafina is so captivated by the view that Vior jokingly warns her not to pass out from the shock. Predictably, Serafina yells at him in frustration, feeling like she is being played with all over again. Trying to cool her temper, Serafina keeps walking, taking in all the wild animals and flocks of birds filling the bright blue sky above the forest. Out of nowhere, Vior explains that dragons are just regular wildlife around here, and will not attack unless provoked. He even playfully reminds her about how greedily she scarfed down that dragon meat earlier this morning. That little reminder instantly makes Serafina blush bright red from embarrassment. She defensively insists that the meat she ate did not look nearly as terrifying as the massive beast that just flew off over their heads. They eventually stop in their tracks when the roaring sound of rushing water becomes super clear. Serafina is completely mesmerized once again, because this is literally the very first time she has ever seen a waterfall in her entire life. Vior brought her here on purpose, knowing that a sight this refreshing is impossible to find in the arid western lands, which only have tiny, dried-up streams. After letting her soak in the gorgeous view, Vior suddenly shifts gears to the real reason they came all the way out here. Serafina nearly has a heart attack and instinctively covers herself up when Vior casually tells her to strip. Turns out, the guy just meant he wanted them all to take a bath together in the waterfall. Naturally, Serafina is absolutely furious at Vior's wildly misleading phrasing. Plus, The whole concept of mixed bathing is considered hugely inappropriate back in her homeland. Vior tries to defend it as just local culture, but Sasay suddenly chimes in with a brutal truth bomb. Serafina's body is actually starting to smell pretty bad. Sasay points out that since they do not have public bathhouses, just wiping down with a damp cloth is not going to cut it against that seriously pungent sweat building up. Left with zero options and utterly mortified, Serafina finally agrees to take the plunge, though she is still super grumpy about the whole thing. Even though Vior heads off to a different part of the stream, Sasay stays behind to bathe with her. She clarifies that she is not there to spy on her, but actually to keep Serafina safe. At first, Serafina has no clue what kind of safety she is talking about until a sudden movement and the water catches her eye. As Serafina tries to argue, Sasay casually points out that they are currently surrounded by a bunch of giant aquatic monsters popping up to the surface. Serafina's fear completely peaks. Without a second thought, she screams at the top of her lungs and decides to make a mad dash straight back to the settlement. She sprints blindly through the woods wearing nothing but a single towel, until she finally realizes her massive blunder. She completely left her clothes and shoes behind. Imagine being stranded alone in the middle of a forest with just a towel. Just as Serafina is about to turn back for her clothes, the hair on the back of her neck stands up. She gets this creepy feeling that someone is watching her from behind the trees. Her mind starts racing with worst-case scenarios, picturing getting attacked by wild beasts or some total creep. In a total panic, Serafina screams out, desperately trying to scare off whoever is hiding in the shadows. But instead of a monster, it is actually Vior who steps out from the mist. Serafina is left completely speechless, just frozen in place as she watches the guy walk toward her. The craziest part is, Vior looks incredibly handsome with those piercing yellow eyes. Serafina, who was terrified just a second ago, is now totally starstruck. Unable to move as she stares at how ridiculously good-looking Vior is standing right in front of her. Seeing the state she is in, Vior looks super confused and guesses she must have been attacked by wild animals while bathing. Feeling her pride stung and completely flustered, Serafina snaps at Vior, yelling at him to stop staring at her. Looking away, Vior casually mentions that his mother was actually a warrior from the west too. Hearing that, it finally clicks for Serafina that descendants from the old expeditions really did manage to survive out here. Right in the middle of their chat, Serafina starts shivering from the cold, without missing a beat. Vior smoothly takes off his cloak and drapes it over her shoulders to keep her from freezing in the damp forest air. That sweet gesture makes Serafina realize that Vior is actually a really decent guy. She never in a million years expected to find a true gentleman in a place she thought was only filled with wild barbarians. The tension totally spikes on their way back when Vior suddenly touches Serafina's forehead to check her temperature. With their faces suddenly so close, Serafina completely panics and short-circuits. Seeing how weak she looks, Vior just goes ahead and scoops her up in a classic bridal carry. He does it purely so they can get back way faster before Serafina's condition gets any worse. Serafina just surrenders to being carried through the dense woods. She is honestly baffled by her own reaction, wondering why she cannot even put up a fight when Vior treats her so sweetly. That awkward moment is finally broken when they run into Sasay, who had been out searching for them. But the weird part is, Sasay immediately greets the guy carrying Serafina as Master Vior. It turns out, the handsome guy she has been with this whole time is actually Vior, who just shaved off his entire beard. Vior bursts out laughing at Serafina's betrayed face, as she finally realizes who he really is. She is so incredibly embarrassed and feels so tricked that she just straight up slaps Vior hard across the cheek, instead of getting mad. Vior is actually super proud and amazed by his future wife's insane physical strength. Even after they get back, and she changes clothes, Serafina just will not stop complaining. She totally rips into Vior for dragging her into a literal monster den that she is convinced was a total death trap. Listening to her rant, Sasay steps in to explain that Vior actually patrols the area constantly to keep it safe. Vior then admits that his original plan was just to hang around and protect Serafina while she bathed. Pointing at a water lizard by the riverbank, Serafina asks if the dragons they ran into earlier were actually dangerous. Vior casually replies that those creatures are honestly just massive cowards. That laid-back answer just makes Cersei shake her head in disbelief. But for Vior, today was a total win because he got to see a completely different, vulnerable side of Serafina that he had never witnessed before. Eventually, Serafina softens up just a bit and decides to forgive Vior, but only for this one time. Even so, she gives him a fierce warning that a humiliating stunt like this better never happen again. Far from learning his lesson, Vior gets even more hyped and keeps loudly calling Serafina his wife. Serafina screams in protest, while Cersei can only stare in pity at the ridiculous antics of these two. As they walk away from the spot, Serafina secretly admits to herself that Vior really does look way more handsome without the beard. But of course, she has way too much pride to ever say that to his face. They finally arrive at the barbarian village. The whole scene plays out alongside Syrah's inner voice, reading a heartfelt letter in her mind to her parents in heaven. But that peaceful vibe vanishes instantly when they are met by the armored warriors. These guys are so eager to fight that Syrah legitimately thinks she's going to meet her maker today. Weirdly enough, instead of attacking her all at once, the warriors start bickering among themselves about who gets to fight Syrah first. Meanwhile, Syrah is just standing there, completely baffled by the whole situation. Right in the middle of all that chaos, Vior steps in and explains that he actually gathered the tribe elders at a specific spot just so he could introduce them to Syrah. Pointing toward the horizon, Vior shows off Lakeside Village. It's the largest settlement in the entire region, and its massive size leaves Syrah absolutely speechless. Seeing how huge the territory is, Syrah is actually super confused as to why they just hand over such crucial intel to her. I mean, if she manages to escape, leaking this military secret could literally destroy them. Instead of feeling threatened, Vior just bursts out laughing. He totally starts teasing Syrah, asking if she's actually just mesmerized by his freshly shaven face. His teasing totally works. Syrah's face turns bright red from embarrassment, even though she keeps defensively insisting that she was just feeling confused. As they walk through the village, Vior keeps poking at Syrah just to see her awkward reactions. Deep down, he's really hoping that she'll just forget about her whole plan to go back home. He even confidently declares his intention to make Syrah his wife. Their banter is so cute that, honestly, the two of them already look exactly like a couple. But the relaxed mood gets tense again once they reach the town square. A massive crowd of armored warriors is there, practically begging Vior for permission to duel Syrah. Syrah is still on high alert and assumes this is some kind of revenge for her slaughtering their comrades earlier. However, Vior calmly tells her to just relax. Vior then shouts out to his troops, making it crystal clear that Syrah's main purpose for being there today is to greet the tribe elders, not to wage war. Surprisingly, the armored warriors obey immediately. Their bloodthirsty aura just vanishes into thin air, which leaves Syrah mentally questioning everything all over again. What's actually going on is that they gathered there to welcome Syrah. They're just eagerly waiting for their turn to get a chance to spar with her sometime in the future. Since Syrah still looks completely skeptical, Vior straight up challenges his warriors, asking if even one of them holds a personal grudge against her. After making sure there's zero ill will, Vior orders them to clear the way. The warriors immediately fall into a neat formation, showing total respect. Finally, as they walk through the formation, Syrah starts to accept this bizarre situation. Still, she mostly just assumes they are only acting this way because they have to follow their leader's orders. Vior strides forward confidently, followed by a very cautious Syrah. Along the path, the ranks of barbarian troops stand tall, watching their every step with seriously intimidating glares. You can really feel the tension as Syrah passes by the warriors in their uniquely designed helmets. Even though she feels all those eyes on her, Syrah walks tall, trying her absolute hardest to maintain her dignity and composure in front of them. Out of nowhere, The troops suddenly present their weapons in a formal salute as Sira walks by. One of the warriors even shouts out loud, praising her incredible fighting skills from their previous battle.
Huh?
That praise sparks a chain reaction, with others calling Sira a fierce warrior. But things take a super awkward turn when they stop just complimenting her strength and start openly hyping up her beauty. The atmosphere gets incredibly rowdy with all the cheering from the troops. They start teasing and joking that Sira is total wife material because they believe she'd give birth to some insanely strong warrior kids. Instantly, Sira's face burns beet red. She loudly protests, reminding them that she is an enemy commander. Vior, meanwhile, just gives a faint smile at his captive's emotional outburst. As they continue walking deeper into the settlement, Vior calmly explains that his people deeply respect anyone who possesses great strength, regardless of their status. Slowly, Sira's attention shifts to the vibe of this coastal village. She observes the peaceful daily hustle of the locals, from fishermen cutting up fish to rows of seafood drying outside the houses. On the flip side, Sira spots a few men skillfully skinning a massive hunted beast, while just a short distance away, kids are happily playing without a single ounce of fear. They keep walking, passing by women who are busy washing and hanging up fabrics. To Sira, life in this village feels like a massive contrast to the battlefield. Everything seems so tranquil and grounded. Their little tour finally stops in front of a modest house with a white curtain over the doorway. Vior invites Sira and Sosei to drop in for a bit. Driven by curiosity, Sosei asks what Vior is planning to do next. He replies that he needs to step away for a moment to discuss some important business with the village elders. Before heading out, Vior calls out to the resident of the house. Moments later, a woman named Yufa steps out from behind the curtain to welcome them. As soon as Yufa appears to greet them, Vior doesn't even beat around the bush. He immediately introduces Sira as the woman who is going to be his wife. Hearing the news, Yufa is absolutely thrilled. She steps in close to examine Sira's face, constantly showering her with compliments about how stunningly beautiful she is. She even grabs Sira's waist to check out her physical sturdiness. This super familiar and sudden treatment completely flusters the female knight, leaving her incredibly embarrassed and awkward. Even though she tries to protest, Sira ends up getting dragged inside the house. Once indoors, her face is still glowing red from Yufa's warm, but totally embarrassing welcome. They all sit down and relax on a cozy hearth. At this point, Yufa sincerely apologizes if her behavior earlier made Sira feel uncomfortable. Their chat flows on amidst the steam rising from an iron kettle hanging over the fire. Even though the ice is definitely breaking, Sira tries her hardest to keep up her formal knightly persona. Seeing her guests, Yufa decides to brew up some refreshing herbal tea. She tells Gata to quickly grab the ingredients stored away inside a wooden chest. After praising Gata for being so quick, Yufa starts mixing the tea. She explains that this herbal tea is a traditional drink that's super commonly served to guests in their region. Since there are quite a few people gathered, Yufa adds more water to the kettle. She then asks Gata and Enna to stoke the fire so the water can boil faster. While waiting, Sira notices just how skilled Gata and Enna are. She looks genuinely impressed watching them carry firewood and manage the hearth just to help brew the tea. Noticing Sira's attention, Yufa explains that Gata and Enna just love copying what the adults do. Meanwhile, Sira keeps watching them closely, starting to wonder about the relationship between the two kids. The vibe inside the house feels even warmer as they sit together waiting for the water to boil. A few more pieces of wood keep getting tossed under the kettle to keep the flames nice and steady. Finally, the tea is ready and served straight to Sira. The moment she takes a sip, Sira is actually shocked because the flavor of this village's herbal tea is way beyond her expectations. Even though Sosei briefly pokes fun at Sira's high-class noble tastes, Sira honestly admits that the tea's aroma is incredibly fresh and genuinely helps her exhausted body feel so much more relaxed. Sira is clearly loving the herbal tea so much that she even asks for seconds, but behind the warmth of that wooden cup, she starts getting super curious about the unusual lifestyle in this village. Her curiosity gets the better of her, and Sira asks why they all live together in a communal house when they don't seem related by blood. She even guesses that maybe their husbands are the warriors standing guard outside. That question instantly turns the mood ice cold when Yufa replies that their husbands passed away a long time ago. Her own husband died, and the war out west while Yufa was still pregnant. Hearing that, Sira gasps and goes completely silent. It suddenly hits her with a bitter dose of reality. These people are victims of her own army's expedition when they were securing resources for the Kingdom of Ilduran. At first, Sira tries to act detached, telling herself it's just the unfortunate reality of war. But when she looks at the bright smiles of the little kids right in front of her, the guilt really starts eating away at her heart. Unable to bear the heavy burden, Sira finally bows her head low and says she is fully prepared to accept their hatred, since she's currently a prisoner. She feels they have every right to take their revenge on her. Completely unexpectedly, Yufa is just confused as to why there should be any revenge at all. This makes Sira literally scream out in frustration over her guilt. Tormented by the thought that she might have been the one who killed their husbands on the battlefield. Calmly hugging her child, Yufa shares that she actually feels lucky. At the very least, she got to be by her husband's side in his final moments before he passed away. To them, dying in battle, whether in a war or while hunting monsters, is just a normal part of life. They've completely accepted that this is simply the destiny men in this region have to face. Sira is just left in awe at how wildly different their outlook on life is compared to her world. But before she can even process it, a warning horn suddenly blares loudly from the village tower. Without any time to brace themselves, the roof of the house caves in under the weight of something absolutely massive. Amidst a suffocating cloud of dust, a giant creature emerges, instantly threatening all of their lives. It turns out to be a Tsukibikishi dragon with white and red fur, standing right in front of Sira. Its sharp, crimson eyes look like they are totally locking onto their prey. Sosei explains that it's a Tsukibikishi dragon, a beast that usually only chases after smoke. The crazy part is, a predator like this shouldn't ever dare to wander this deep into a residential area. Realizing the immense danger, Sira immediately yells at the others to run for their lives, even though Sosei keeps tugging at her hand to escape together. Sira stays stubborn and refuses to budge an inch. Sira is absolutely sick of seeing the people here being so resigned and used to death. This time, she chooses to stand tall, not as a conqueror, but as a protector ready to take on the dragon all by herself. With a booming voice, she introduces herself as Serafina de Lavillant, Knight Commander of Ilduran, without a single drop of hesitation, and armed with literally nothing but a pair of fire tongs. She recklessly charges straight at the dragon. Sosei is super doubtful seeing Sira try to fight a dragon with just fire tongs. But that doubt quickly turns into pure horror when the floor of the building suddenly shatters as the monster rams into it from below. Instead of backing down, Sira just straight up bashes the dragon's neck with her tongs. She boldly declares that she won't retreat a single step, because her pride, as Sira demands she protect the people. Standing behind her, an epic duel breaks out right inside the crumbling building. While constantly blocking its attacks, Sira screams at Sosei and Yufa to get out of there and save themselves. Sira keeps forcing them to leave, feeling that they'd only get in the way. Finally, in tears, Sosei is forced to run, screaming back that she'll laugh at Sira if she actually dares to die here. Meanwhile, outside the building, the warriors are moving fast. They're using thick ropes to snare and forcefully drag away the other dragons that are attacking the village. In the midst of all that chaos, Vior leaps high into the air and slashes the monster in front of him until it's completely down for the count. His strike is so insanely powerful that it kicks up a massive cloud of dust everywhere. Once the area is secure, Vior orders his troops to prioritize the safety of the villagers. Deep down, he feels pretty confident that Sira is doing just fine since she's hanging out with Sosei. However, that confidence totally shatters when Vior goes looking for the one remaining monster. Suddenly, Sosei runs up to him all alone and crying, begging him to save Sira, who got left behind. The second he finds out Sira purposely acted as bait so the villagers could escape, Vior dashes off at lightning speed. He's moving so fast that he literally leaves a long trail of dust in his wake down the village road. Over on the other side, an exhausted Sira is being chased by the dragon all the way out into the open streets. Unfortunately, the monster's running speed is way faster than Sira, who is already panting heavily. Things get super critical when Sira's hands start shaking violently because she's completely out of stamina. As a result, the dragon manages to counterattack and smacks the fire tongs right out of her hands. Even though she's now cornered in a dead-end alley without her main weapon, Sira still boldly draws her small knife. She even takes a second to think about just how incredibly cunning the monster in front of her is. Recalling the genuine smiles of the villagers, Sira steels her resolve. She feels that it's completely fine if she has to die an honorable death while fulfilling her duty as a knight. Right before the dragon lunges, Vior suddenly appears out of nowhere and tells Sira to cover her ears. He lets out a deafening, lethal roar, followed up by an insanely fast dual sword slash. As soon as the monster collapses, Vior apologizes for showing up late. He is genuinely so thankful that Sira fought so hard to protect the lives of the villagers and Cersei. Beyond just being thankful, Vior honestly feels deeply relieved. He is incredibly grateful to see that Sira is actually still alive and completely okay. Hearing those words, all the pent-up tension inside Sira finally breaks. She suddenly starts sobbing uncontrollably without even knowing why. Especially since her life was just saved from certain death. Under the twilight sky, Vior finally scoops Sira up in his arms to carry her back home. Even though she's still crying in his embrace, at least the whole dragon threat is now officially over. As night falls, the vibe gets incredibly cozy, with Serafina happily sipping a drink from her horn cup alongside Cersei. Right in the middle of that chill moment, she suddenly remembers the embarrassing time Vior carried her. Even though it made her blush like crazy, she secretly loved it because it was the very first time a man had ever protected her like that. Noticing the shift in her mood, Cersei points out that Serafina is way friendlier now compared to when they first met. That little compliment instantly makes our favorite Princess Knight blush even harder. Before heading off to grab another round of drinks, Cersei even takes a moment to express her admiration, genuinely amazed that there are still nobles out there willing to risk their lives for others. But as soon as she is left alone, Serafina falls right back into her thoughts, constantly shaking her head to chase away the image of Vior that just refuses to leave her mind. Her daydreaming is shattered in an instant by a tiny voice, and to her absolute shock, she sees a whole group of fairies fluttering around playfully right in front of her face. She is so startled and totally convinced she is just hallucinating from the booze that Serafina literally does a spit take with her drink, which only makes the little fairies burst into uncontrollable laughter. Serafina immediately jumps to her feet, ready to demand where Vior has been hiding this whole time, but her attention is quickly stolen by a deep voice greeting her from the side. It turns out Vior has brought along the most unique entourage ever, featuring the fairies, an elf named Kalka, and even the dwarf elders. The atmosphere becomes incredibly festive as the villagers and the fairies team up to serve a massive feast, while Nimhara steps up to offer a very special brew straight from the holy tree. This whole mystical sight leaves Serafina completely shell-shocked. She honestly starts to think her hallucinations have gone off the deep end and completely defied all logic. Right in the middle of the elders joyfully celebrating Vior's marriage, Barha steps forward to present Serafina with a very special gift, a sword sheathed in a striking red scabbard. Even though she hesitates to accept something so obviously valuable, Vior tells her to just relax and urges her to draw the blade so she can see its top-tier quality for herself. The moment she pulls the sword from its scabbard, Serafina is absolutely mesmerized by the flawless and blemished blade that gleams beautifully like a pearl. She is completely blown away by its perfect balance and the intricate engravings. Serafina even suspects the sword might be infused with magic because its radiant glow feels so otherworldly. The climax of the night hits when Vior officially introduces Serafina to the tribal elders as his future queen, which instantly makes the poor princess cover her face in absolute, overwhelming embarrassment. Noticing that his wife is starting to feel the pressure, Vior steps in to calm her down, assuring her that these creatures are very real and are actually their good neighbors, not just myths from a fairy tale. Nemhara then offers her a special leaf known for its calming effects on people in shock, which Serafina accepts with the most hilariously deadpan expression ever. As a result, even though she can barely believe her own eyes, Serafina cannot deny reality anymore. She starts feeling totally drained from processing way too much new information in such a short a moon. Of time. Eventually, she leans her head on Vior's shoulder and asks why they are only showing themselves now. Vior explains that he intentionally set up this gathering so Serafina could officially meet all the clan leaders. Vior goes on to reveal that these tribes are the great tribes that make up the Intertribal Alliance, living in harmony under the protection of the Great Spirit. This alliance has been going strong in these lands for thousands of years. The different races work together simply because they deeply understand the natural flow of the universe that binds them all. Hearing this makes Serafina realize that these so-called barbarians actually have a highly sophisticated cultural alliance. Even if this particular meeting feels way more like a drinking party than a strict military council. Curiosity taking over, Serafina stands up and asks if this alliance was formed to face a wartime crisis. But her super serious question is met with roaring laughter from the tribal leaders. Chuckling, Vior explains that the Intertribal Alliance never interferes with territorial disputes, mainly because they view human wars as nothing more than wild animals fighting over scraps. He adds that the Alliance's goal is never to oppress other races. In fact, they claim that even a dragon threat could easily be handled by any individual tribe without even needing the Alliance's backup. That bold statement only makes Serafina insanely curious about what kind of massive threat is actually out there, prompting Vior to start explaining the incredibly vicious nature of dragons. Continuing the dragon talk, Vior mentions that while dragons are definitely smart and powerful, they are honestly nowhere near as terrifying as the monstrous entities known as fiends. Vior warns Serafina about the existence of these incredibly dangerous monsters, noting that their sheer power is basically on par with living natural disasters. Hearing the conversation take such a dark and creepy turn, Viu immediately cuts in, refusing to let monster talk ruin their awesome party vibes. They quickly go back to toasting Serafina's marriage, and out of nowhere, a child from the Kafuek tribe runs up to hand her a bowl of food. Vior explains that the Kafuek tribe possesses the highest vitality in the entire land, meaning Serafina is super lucky to get such special attention from them. On the flip side, some of the locals start playfully teasing Serafina about her healthy, fertile figure, hinting that she is perfectly built to bear children soon, which makes her blush furiously. Vior tries to soothe her by explaining that their teasing is actually just their way of giving a blessing. Plus, the gorgeous dress she is wearing was woven directly by the fairies. And it is not just the dress, her necklace was crafted by the dwarves, and her new sword was enchanted with an auto-repair magic by the X tribe, so it literally never needs maintenance. The tribes here truly complete one another, making this isolated territory feel incredibly blessed despite being cut off from the outside civilized world. By the next afternoon at the coastal village, Serafina wakes up with a massive hangover. She is so startled that she accidentally bumps into a little kid while trying to stand up. As she wanders around the village, Serafina feels like she is literally living in a fairy tale, especially since all the magical gifts from the locals feel so solid and real in her hands. However, there is one thing that really confuses her that morning. Vior has completely shaved his beard, which is crazy since his facial hair grows incredibly fast. When lunchtime rolls around, Serafina is coaxed into trying a dragon meat sandwich, which actually turns out to be made from the very same dragon she defeated just yesterday afternoon. Even though she is initially hesitant because of the slightly fishy smell, Serafina ends up absolutely loving the savory taste so much, so that she actually asks for seconds. Right in the middle of her enjoying the meal, Vior suddenly invites Serafina to meet someone who really wants to see her. It turns out to be a pregnant woman named Nilia. The meeting gets super emotional really fast, as Nilia greets her with the utmost respect, fondly reminiscing about how incredibly badass Serafina used to be. Serafina is a bit confused at first since her own appearance has changed so much, but then Nilia drops the bomb that she is actually one of Serafina's former knight's subordinates. Serafina is even more stunned when Nilia mentions this is her second pregnancy, proving just how much has changed during the 4 years they have been apart. While chilling at the house, Nilia shares that she ended up getting proposed to by the very man who once defeated her in battle, and now she couldn't be happier with her new life. But behind all those warm reunion vibes, Serafina gets absolutely blindsided by an unexpected truth regarding Vior's real age. Serafina immediately pinches Vior's cheek, completely refusing to believe that her husband is only 18 years old, especially since that thick beard makes his face look so incredibly mature. Who would have thought? Serafina is genuinely shocked to her core to find out Vior is just 18. His bearded look really did a great job of making him seem way older than he actually is. Instead of backing down from her teasing, Vior just laughs it off and smoothly compliments her, saying that being 26 makes Serafina look absolutely stunning and in the prime of her beauty. Vior even gets suddenly romantic, wishing out loud that he had been born earlier so he could have met Serafina sooner, without their age gap ever being an issue. Right after a firm rejection from her, Vior immediately bows his head and offers a deeply sincere apology. He realizes his youthful arrogance might have insulted Serafina's pride as a fellow warrior. Meanwhile, during a chat with Sasei, Nilia explains that his apology is totally justified because there is actually a secret behind Vior's victory when he and Serafina dueled back then. Nilia spills the tea, revealing that Vior only won that fight because he had far superior weapon quality and stamina, not because his combat techniques were actually better than Serafina's. As a result, having the secret to his victory exposed right in front of Serafina makes Vior feel incredibly embarrassed, and he practically begs Nilia to drop the subject. Once the awkwardness settles down, Vior privately apologizes to her again, confessing how incredibly lucky he feels that fate brought him a woman as amazing as Serafina. Unexpectedly, the house gets even livelier when Nilia's husband walks in carrying their child. He casually greets Vior with a super familiar and relaxed nickname. Seeing how happily Nilia welcomes her little family, Serafina falls silent and offers a soft smile, genuinely touched by the heartwarming scene playing out right in front of her. It really gets Serafina thinking. She used to believe that a female knight's life had to be rigid and strict, but her view on these people she once called savages is slowly starting to change. By nightfall, while sitting alone at the pier, Serafina falls into deep thought. She realizes she never knew anything about the beautiful culture of the very land her country wants to invade. She begins to feel a heavy sense of guilt, recognizing that she used the label barbarian just to justify oppression, passing it off as a noble duty for her homeland. During this quiet reflection, Serafina finally admits to herself that she genuinely likes Vior as a person. However, her identity as a noble knight of Ilduran remains a massive wall she just can't abandon yet. Because of that, she resolves to use this experience to save her own people, feeling that she isn't quite worthy yet to stand proudly as Vior's wife. But, getting way too embarrassed after confessing her true feelings the night before, Serafina literally runs away screaming, leaving a very confused Vior behind. Hilariously, at breakfast the next morning, Vior has a blast teasing Serafina about how incredibly sweet and honest she was during their private chat at the pier. Even though Serafina panics and tries to use the classic "I was just drunk" excuse, Vior praises her anyway, proving that Serafina can be wonderfully honest even when she is completely sober.